The dawn of a new era. Felix Tshisekedi is sworn in as the new president of the Democratic Republic of Congo in the first peaceful transfer of power in the history of the country. A new World Health Organization report says refugees and immigrants are not bringing diseases to Europe. And remembering the life and music of an African icon, tributes pour in for Zimbabwe's Oliver Mtukudzi. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. We begin with a historic inauguration. Opposition leader Felix Tshisekedi was sworn in Thursday as the president of Democratic Republic of Congo. He succeeded longtime leader Joseph Kabila. It was the DRC's first transfer of power through an election in 59 years of independence. Tshisekedi's victory in the December 30th election was marred by accusations he struck a backroom deal with Kabila to deny victory to run-up opposition candidate Martin Fayulu. Both Kabila and Tshisekedi deny the allegation. Tshisekedi took the oath of office before a crowd of thousands of cheering supporters, government officials and foreign ambassadors. He paused briefly during his inaugural address before continuing because he was not feeling well. However, in a sign of lingering doubts about the vote's credibility, Kenya's Uhuru Kenyatta was the only foreign head of state present. Still, the imagery of one leader handing over of the presidents to another as Kabila wrapped up the presidential sash around his successor was striking in a country where previous power transfers have resulted only from coups, assassinations or rebellion. During his speech, Tshisekedi called for a reconciled Congo. Now, for the latest on Felix Tshisekedi's inauguration, journalist Anastasia Tudiesha joins me by phone from Kinshasa. Good evening, Anastasia.
Good evening, Vincent. Good evening to everyone.
Thank you. Now, first, let's talk about the little scare there in the middle of the ceremony. Tshisekedi fell ill. What are the reports now?
Well, the president is fine now. It seems like the heat took a toll on him, and he was taken care of. Everybody was scared. His family and his political and biological family rushed to the stage to see if everything was fine with him. And once they realized that he would be fine, everybody went back to their place, back to their seats, and Mr. Tshisekedi stood up and kept doing his speech.
Indeed, good news, a good turnout of events there. Now, talk about how this day has been observed by the people of the DRC. What has it been to them?
Of course, people who were there, Vincent, as you can imagine, were high supporters of Mr. Tshisekedi. And one moment I recall was when he was during his speech, before he fell ill, he was speaking, and the crowd started to chant, "Felix, don't remember what your daddy said, that the power was to the people." And their voice covering his voice. That was a very striking moment. Another striking moment, Vincent, was when there was a close shot on giant screens showing Emmanuel Ramazani Shadary, Mr. Kabila's choice for presidential candidate, showing the V sign with his two fingers, victory sign, that the late Etienne Tshisekedi, the actual president's father, used to do. And he was showing this V sign along with Vital Kamerhe, Mr. Tshisekedi's partner for this election. So this was a very strong moment, and the crowd applauded, and everybody was screaming and was very surprised.
What a moment. Indeed.
And the accolade between the two presidents was a very strong moment, another very strong moment as well.
Very significant. What a day. Anastasia, thank you very much. Anastasia Tudiesha reporting from Kinshasa. Now, for more on the historic transfer of power in the DRC, I'm joined by Ntala Limasi, a governance and capacity development specialist. Ntala, welcome back to Africa 54.
Thank you.
First, What was your reaction to the events of today? How did you feel as a person who's a native of the DRC?
A lot of things, but mostly a sense of relief after what has been going on, and secondly, a sense of a little bit of pride and saying thank you. Finally, we get to turn that corner of the history where the DRC seemed to be this place where people just live in a jungle. Whoever wants gets it, and but today we saw that what they call themselves a civilized transfer of power, where one says goodbye, another says, good morning, and here I am. And I liked also the message that the conciliatory tone of President Tshisekedi now into the welcoming of all the other people to work with him, but also the fact that for the first time,
yes,
we can say we turned the page of history.
Indeed, 59 years, such a long time. No, most Congolese have never seen this. But new President Tshisekedi, what are some of the challenges he faces now? We know that some of the supporters of the other opposition candidate, Fayulu, may not be very enthusiastic about today. So what must he do to make sure that the DRC moves forward in a peaceful and harmonious way?
Yeah. Apart from the usual, challenges that will before somebody who gets into the reins of power in a country like the DRC, looking at its size, looking at the problems of security that they have, the social problems that they have, looking at, let's call it the eyes of the world being on the Congolese minerals, etc. There's also that little fact that is circulating everywhere. Everybody seems to think that there was a deal that was struck between him and Kabila, and that means that the trust is not good. So he's going to have to, I guess, to jump that hurdle of gaining trust and saying, now there is also the other biggest one, the fact that all of a sudden he's going to have to govern in a divided, government.
Yes.
Meaning that with the FCC, as they call it, having the parliament, and he having the executive. I'm starting to feel a little bit like Obama with the Republicans
exactly.
here. What is going to happen? So that's
so with that kind of a divided kind of country, what are some of the challenges you think he'll have to face in a country that has gone through so much?
Well, the legendary 100 days will be he will have to show that he masters the situation, that he has a project of society where all the Congolese are going to find themselves in, that he's going to look at what really is bad in this country, the corruption that is rampant, the impunity that is rampant in the DRC, and he will have to show people that he means well and he can do it. So that will be the first part of
the security, of the DRC.
The security, the part. Then there will be the international community, I mean, the neighbors, and everybody wants to see something that, they can rely on and say, hey, we are working towards something with this guy. Does he have a plan? Indeed. And can he put that plan to work?
Indeed, Congo, the DRC on a new path. We hope everything plays out well in the coming days. Thank you very much, Ntala, for joining us today.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Well, Ntala Limasi is a governance and capacity development specialist and a native of the Democratic Republic of Congo. To the west now, just weeks before Nigeria's presidential election, the leading female candidate in the race is pulling out. Obiageli Esquezili says she will help build a coalition to provide a viable alternative to the country's two main parties. Nigerian voters head to the polls on February the 16th. Ezekwesili said on Twitter that she'll be in talks for 3 months with other candidates about a coalition. She's a former government minister and the co-founder of the civil society organization Transparency International. She was considered for the 2018 Nobel Peace Prize in recognition of her anti-corruption work. Ezekwesili has become known more recently for her work as a co-founder of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign, which seeks to raise awareness about some 270 girls who were kidnapped from their school in the northeast Nigerian town of Chibok in April 2014 by Boko Haram. The United States is concerned about the increasing number of arrests and detentions, as well as the escalating number of people injured and killed following 4 weeks of protests across Sudan. Human rights groups say dozens of people have died, and the government has routinely responded with force to peaceful protesters. VOA Salem Solomon spoke with Mo Ibrahim, a Sudanese-British billionaire and the founder of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, about what the unrest says about the state of the country and what might happen next.
So as you watch the unprecedented protests taking place in Sudan, what are your thoughts?
I think it's a total rejection of the rule of Bashir and his Islamicist party in Sudan. After 30 years, people just got fed up. Their life is almost impossible. Failed policies, aggressive posture of the government. We had wars in the south. They declared jihad on our citizens and ended up splitting the country. They had the massacres in Darfur, and the economic side. I mean, the people are hungry, and they see the looting of the country resources by the ruling clique. Just people had enough.
Your foundation has called on the Sudanese government to respect the rights of civilians to peacefully assemble and protest, but it has also condemned the arrest of opposition figures and censorship of the press. What's your message to the government?
Really, enough is enough. And abuse of human rights will not just pass. I mean, they will be held accountable. And if Bashir escaped the International Criminal Court for a number of years, he and his people will not escape justice forever.
What needs to happen next?
I think we need the international community to stand up and to show some moral backbone. Media in large has been quite silent about what's going on. All those people are being killed daily in Sudan, and the level of reporting is just incredibly low.
As you look at the democratic landscape of Africa, there are signs of difficulty in places like Sudan and Democratic Republic of Congo, but there are also positive signs in places including Ethiopia. How do you assess the state of democracy on the continent right now, and are things moving in the right direction?
We are 54 countries, and inevitably we have a handful of countries where we have difficulties. We have difficulties in Sudan. We have difficulties in South Sudan. We have difficulties in DRC. Although at least the fact that we managed to have an election there, that's a step forward. How credible is that election is yet to be seen. But there's a lot of positive things happening in Angola, in Botswana, in Namibia, in Ghana, and I will hope in Nigeria, which will have elections soon. I hope we can also see peaceful elections. But I think the battle now is moving towards peaceful elections, more transparency. I'm optimistic, and I think we're moving forward. Unfortunately, not in my country.
Well, British Sudanese business mogul Mo Ibrahim speaking with VOA Salem Solomon. Time now for a health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with a look at children and exposure to lead poisoning. Lino.
That's right, Vincent. A new study suggests the lasting effects of lead on the brain of children may extend to certain personality traits in adulthood. Researchers in New Zealand analyzed data from a large multi-generational health study among more than 500 subjects whose blood lead levels were tested when they were children. The scientists say those with higher levels of lead as kids were more likely to have personality traits that have been linked to a number of poor life outcomes, including greater psychopathology, worse physical health, and troubled interpersonal relationships. They say although the effects they found were modest, they were comparable to results in past studies, including a small drop in IQ and a slightly greater risk for criminal behavior. The impact of lead also turned out to be comparable to that of other modifiable risk factors, such as abuse during childhood. Lead is a chemical element that can be found in the air, the soil, the water, and even inside homes. Experts say steps to help you reduce the risk of lead exposure include keeping children away from busy roads and the underside of bridges, washing kids' hands and toys often, and wiping dusty surfaces at home clean with a wet cloth. Now, refugees and migrants arriving in Europe are not bringing infectious diseases with them, according to a report from the World Health Organization. In the first large-scale survey of migrant health on the continent, the WHO report calls for European governments to ensure migrants get access to health services. Henry Ridgewell has the details.
Italy ordered the seizure of the migrant rescue ship Aquarius last November, claiming it was carrying contaminated clothing discarded by refugees that could be infected with HIV, meningitis and tuberculosis. Medical experts dismissed the suggestion. It is one example of widely held myths about the health of migrants arriving in Europe, according to the report authors.
The refugees and migrants who come to Europe, they do not bring any exotic diseases with them, any exotic communicable diseases. The diseases that they might have, they are all well-established diseases in Europe. And also we have very good prevention and control programs for these diseases.
Despite the terrible conditions faced by many, the conclusions of the WHO report are generally upbeat. Migrants are likely to have good general health, but they can be at risk of falling sick while on the move. People displaced from their home countries face higher exposure to infections, a lack of access to healthcare, and frequently poor living conditions.
I don't think that in most of the countries the illegal migrants have access to the health systems, health services. The illegal migrants are not visible to the authorities, so to say.
The WHO warns that amid the current hostile debate over migration in Europe, many countries may fail to meet the healthcare needs of migrant populations. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter @Elinor Moudou. Vincent, back to you.
Well, Lenore, thank you very much. And I'll be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. The partial shutdown of the U.S. government is in its 33rd day, and neither side can be sure about the long-term political fallout. Public opinion polls show more Americans are blaming President Donald Trump than opposition Democrats at the moment. And this standoff is already serving as a likely blueprint for the 2020 presidential election battle. VOA national correspondent Jim Malone reports from Washington.
Government workers line up for free groceries in Washington, a helping hand at a time of need. There's no end in sight to the partial government shutdown, and politically, both sides appear to be dug in. President Trump remains adamant about funding for a wall along the southern border.
Well, I hope that Speaker Pelosi can come along and realize what everybody knows. I mean, no matter who it is, they know that walls work. and we need walls.
Democrats remain firmly opposed to wall funding, including Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer.
We want the symbol of America to remain the Statue of Liberty, freedom, equality, not a divisive wall. And we will fight for that. Fight for that, we will.
Those who remain caught in the middle are government workers, either on furlough or working without pay, like FBI agent Tom O'Connor.
FBI agents should not have to go work at a store stocking shelves because they can't feed their families on their government job.
Politically, the shutdown helps no one, says Jim Kessler.
Trump is losing on this, Congress is losing on this, and then federal workers who are without pay are losing on this.
Several recent polls have put more of the blame for the shutdown on Trump, says John Fortier.
I mean, public opinion polls, I think, are more against the president than against the Democrats. His numbers have suffered, but just a small amount. And so I think the both sides feel their bases are committed to these differences in principle, and that makes solving this much more difficult.
Democrats also appear unified to defy the president, says Jim Kessler.
Democrats aren't really eager to fund a campaign promise of Donald Trump that he said Mexico was going to pay for. And so we're locked in a duel right now, and somebody's going to have to blink or find a creative way out.
For the moment, neither side appears willing to budge, notes Larry Sabato.
It's hard to see how it will end, but it's bound to end. And both sides will have to give something. Exactly what they'll give is just a question mark right now.
Analysts predict the shutdown impasse could define divided government over the next 2 years and also serves as a likely preview of the next presidential campaign in 2020. Jim Malone, VOA News, Washington.
Zimbabweans are mourning the most successful and internationally renowned musician, Oliver Mtukudzi. The 66-year-old singer, affectionately known as Tuku, died at a local clinic on Wednesday after suffering from diabetes, ending a career that spanned 4 decades and produced 67 albums. In a recent visit to Zimbabwe, VOA Music Time in Africa host Heather Maxwell met up with Tuku, and they talked about how he was giving back to society.
Norton, Zimbabwe is the home of Pakare Paye Arts Center. The founder of the center is Oliver Mtukudzi, the legendary Tuku. We're about to meet him, the perfect time to catch up with him, find out what he's up to, and see how he's giving back to the community through music. Tuku, it is such an honor and a privilege to be here at your gorgeous arts center up here in Norton, Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much, sir. It's good to see you once again. After how many years? I think that was 2012.
It was, and you were in the VOA studio in Washington, D.C. Hey,
Thank
Oliver,
you.
how you doing?
I'm good, and yourself?
I'm fine, thanks. And I said then, I really would like to visit your school. Can I do that if I come to Zimbabwe? And you said...
Oh, yes, you can. You're welcome.
So tell me, what has been happening and what are you doing now with your music?
Well, I'm here to release my 67th album, so I'm very excited.
What is going to be different or special about this album? I mean, that might be hard to say since you've done so many, but is there one thing?
Oh, yes. I mean, every album has got its own topic. It's got its own agenda. And this one is about the whole world, why the world is having disputes. I guess it's we are all in the wrong positions that God created us for. That's why. We are following our passion instead of being who we are.
How do you know who you are?
Parents are supposed to help you identify yourself. And I believe children talk to the parents that, hey, this is who I am. And parents feel otherwise. No, I want my baby to be a doctor, a medical doctor. And they push their child to be a medical doctor. And yet he was created to play a drum.
right now we're in front of the Sam Mtukudzi Conference Center, dedication to your lost son. I'm so sorry about that.
Well, he is the one who started the conference center, so...
Yeah, it's his.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel like you're just too tired now to keep touring?
Well, age is catching up, but I can't run away from myself. I have to do it.
Tuku, Oliver Mtukudzi, thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. Thank you. And it's good to see you again.
Well, for more on the legacy of Oliver Mtukudzi, I'm joined by viewer Zimbabwe journalist Blessing Zulu. Zulu, welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, before I ever knew of any other Zimbabwean musician, I knew only of Oliver Mtukudzi. Everybody else has come after that. What does he mean to the people of Zimbabwe?
I think one can say he was the pulse of the nation, because if you look at his music, dating back to when Zimbabwe was fighting for its liberation war in the 70s, he was already singing, actually inspiring people to join the liberation war alongside the likes of Thomas Mapfumo. So that is, he has got a rich history. You can also say that he embodies the history of Zimbabwe from the liberation war even to post-colonial Zimbabwe. Tuku was singing about the trials and tribulations of the nation.
Did he ever run into trouble for maybe weaving some political messages into some of the social issues in his songs?
Yes, during the colonial era, yes. He was indeed harassed by the Ian Douglas Smith regime for the way he was singing songs like Zandi Momotera, where he was talking about the suffering of the black people in pre-colonial, rather in colonial Zimbabwe. And then after independence as well, he had a song, Wasakara, that the government of former President Robert Mugabe interpreted to mean that he was mocking the president, because it was saying that if you have aged, you must admit, you know, that your time is up. But of course, he was a very smart musician, and he used to say, no, I don't sing politics. You interpret it the way you want. Of course, he was constantly harassed. Yeah.
Very quickly, I've listened to people like younger musicians like Jah Prayzah. Do you feel like there's influence there? To what extent has he been an influence to the younger ones?
He has. You know, it's like he knew that his life was going to be cut short, because he has many collaborations with these young upcoming musicians in Zimbabwe. Jah Prayzah, Sulumani, you name them, almost everyone. Fungisai Zhakawapano, quite a lot. And he also collaborated, of course, with some international artists like the late Hugh Masekela, who he said was his best friend.
Thank you, Zulu. What a legend. Thank you very much. And that's Zulu. Blessing Zulu. Thanks, and have a good night.